welcome to this edition of Arirang News. I'm June. North Korea is actively reaching out to China and Russia to have them by its side as the important summits with South Korea and the U.S. are quickly approaching. South Korea, meanwhile, has been stepping up cooperation with the U.S. and Japan to successfully bring about denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. So, what role should South Korea play from here on out in order to have the upper hand in the upcoming summits? Before we try to answer that question with an expert, let's first head over to Devin Whiting at the News Center for the latest headlines at this hour. Devin, take us away.
Hi, June. More talks are scheduled tomorrow between working-level officials from South and North Korea to prepare for their big summit. After that's done, it's expected that most questions like protocol, security, and the meeting's agenda will be settled. Cha Sang-mi has this report.
There's just 10 days to go until the historic 2018 Inter-Korean Summit. It has even been given an official slogan, Peace, a New Start. The phrase mirrors the Korean people's hope that the April 27th summit will serve as a new start for peace between the two Koreas. The summit is the first meeting between the leaders of the two Koreas in 11 years, after the 2007 summit between then South Korean President Roh Moo-hyun and Kim Jong-un's father, Kim Jong-il. The upcoming summit is set to take place on the southern side of the demarcation line at the truce village of Panmunjom. President Moon Jae-in reportedly sees the event as a one-time chance to tackle the problems on the Korean peninsula that have lingered on from the Cold War period.
한 번에 모든 문제를 다 해결하겠다는 지나친 의욕으로 접근하기보다는 이번 남북 정상회담을 계기로 오랜 기간 단절되었던 남북 관계를 복원하고 평화와 번영의 한반도로 나아가는 튼튼한 지짐돌을 놓는다는 생각으로 임해주기 바랍니다.
The preparations for the April 27th summit will mostly be wrapped up at the Inter-Korean working-level talks on Wednesday. Officials from both sides will negotiate details of the protocol, security, communication, and media coverage for the day. Some 2,500 local and foreign reporters will cover the historic Inter-Korean Summit at a large-scale press center that's being set up at Korean International Exhibition Center in Ilsan, Gyeonggi-do Province, as well as a small press room just 50 meters away from the Peace House in Panmunjom. The agenda of the summit will include a denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, building peace and improving inter-Korean relations. There is some expectation that the Inter-Korean Summit will culminate in an April 27th agreement and that it could be a starting point for the U.S.-North Korea Summit in May. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
And ahead of that summit with the U.S., the Kim Jong-un regime is looking to improve its ties with its longtime ally, China. And it would appear China wants to do the same thing. President Xi Jinping is said to be interested in visiting Pyongyang in June. Kim Yo-san reports.
Chinese President Xi Jinping might visit North Korea in June, following the summit between Washington and Pyongyang. Citing multiple sources, Japanese daily Yomiuri Shimbun reported that the matter appears to have been discussed between the regime's leader Kim Jong-un and Song Tao, a senior Chinese diplomat, visiting Pyongyang with a Chinese art delegation. Although Beijing's foreign ministry did not confirm the details of the discussion, it did say that high-level exchanges play a crucial role in the relationship between the two allies.
Not long ago, President Xi Jinping said that he would like to keep in touch with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the new era through exchanges, envoy visits, messages to each other, and other methods to maintain constant contact.
Mending its relations with Beijing appears to be crucial for North Korea, especially with its scheduled summit with Washington. And China, on its part, appears to be trying to ramp up its influence over the Korean peninsula by improving its relations with Pyongyang at a time when Washington-Beijing tensions remain high. The Pyongyang performance by the Chinese art troupe is also a sign of warming ties between Beijing and the North after Kim's landmark visit to the Chinese capital last month. Kim Yo-san, Arirang News.
Former South Korean President Park Geun-hye was set to go on trial today, again, this time for allegedly intervening illegally in the nomination of candidates for her former political party. But as in her last trial, Park refused to attend, so the hearing has been postponed to Thursday. Park is accused of ordering her senior political secretary at the time, Hyun-gi Kwan, to arrange for allies of hers to be nominated by the Saenuri Party in the 2016 parliamentary election. Park's lawyers have said she gave no such orders. The former leader, already in jail, was sentenced earlier this month to 24 years behind bars. The court said today that if Park does not attend the rescheduled hearing on Thursday, then it's possible she'll be tried in absentia. Police have opened an investigation into an executive at Korean Air for allegedly throwing a bottle of water at a man in a business meeting last month, the so-called bottle rage incident that made headlines last week. Cho Hyun-min is a senior vice president and the daughter of the airline's chairman. Also, the Transport Ministry has ordered Korean Air to look into how it was that Cho was registered as an executive with the company under her American name, Emily. Kan Hyung-woo reports.
Police on Tuesday officially charged Korean Air executive and heiress Cho Hyun-min over the so-called bottle raise incident, filing a request for her to be banned from leaving the country. According to the police, witnesses said that Cho threw water towards several people during a business meeting between Korean Air and an advertising company. And in another incident involving Cho Hyun-min, Transport Ministry officials have said that they plan to order Korean Air and its subsidiary Jin Air to probe how Cho was registered as an executive at Jin Air under her American name from 2010 to 2016. South Korea's current Aviation Act forbids people who are not Korean nationals from becoming a registered executive at a national airline. The ministry has the right to cancel the certificate of any airline that violates the act. Last week, Cho made headlines for allegedly throwing a bottle of water at an advertising firm manager in a meeting in March. She denies throwing the bottle at the man, but admits that she did push him and has apologized for what she called her foolish behavior. Korean Air officials said Monday that Cho has been removed from her duties until police finish investigating the incident. A petition launched last Friday on the website of the presidential office has so far been signed by more than 68,000 Koreans, demanding that the airline remove the word Korean from its name and stop using a Korean national symbol as its logo, saying the owner's behavior degrades the country and the company. Foreign news outlets have reported the incident by explaining the concept of 갑질, the unfortunate cultural practice of some executives in Korea who abuse subordinates and contractors. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
Business sentiment among Korean manufacturers is looking much brighter in the second quarter thanks to strong exports of semiconductors. The Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry says its business survey index stood at 97 in the April to June period, up 11 points from the previous quarter. Although a reading below 100 means there are still more pessimists than optimists, the index now sits at a high not seen in 3 years. Korea's IT and electronics sectors rose to 112 thanks to soaring demand for memory chips. Business sentiment was lowest among Korea's steel and automobile manufacturers. The rift between Western nations and Russia is deepening over a suspected chemical weapons attack in Syria. Inspectors are reportedly being blocked by Syrian and Russian authorities from entering the alleged attack site. The U.S. says it's because Russia or Syria wants to tamper with evidence. Noam reports.
The United Kingdom says inspectors from the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons were blocked Monday from entering the site in Duma despite having UN clearance. The US says that is because Syria and its allies are trying to tamper with evidence on the ground. In an interview with the BBC, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov denied that was the case. He blamed the delays on retaliatory US-led missile strikes on Syria over the weekend. He also said the US and its allies had no proof of the alleged poison gas attack, saying that any evidence they claim to have is from media reports and social media. The US and France say they have proof such an attack took place but haven't yet made that evidence public. Inspectors from the OPCW would be able to establish what happened and who was to blame. They travelled to Syria last week to inspect the site but have yet to gain access to Duma, which is now under government control. But the Russian military said they will be allowed to visit the site on Wednesday. Meanwhile, President Trump has reportedly put a stop to plans to impose additional sanctions on Russia over its role in the alleged attack. US Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, had told a CBS interview that sanctions would be announced on Monday. US media have quoted White House officials as saying that Trump conferred with his national security advisors after Haley's announcement, but was uncomfortable with approving economic sanctions at this time. Noam, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines for this hour.
With worries that Japan might be left out of the rapidly changing political situation in Northeast Asia, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe heads to Florida to sit down with U.S. President Donald Trump for 2 days of talks. Now there, Mr. Abe will be determined to fly back home with some solid assurances from Mr. Trump on the issues of trade as well as North Korea. Our Lee Ji-won has more.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe will be visiting the U.S. for 4 days starting Tuesday, where he will hold a 2-day summit with President Trump on North Korea, bilateral trade, and more. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders told reporters on Monday that the summit will be centered primarily on preparation for talks with North Korea, as well as economic issues. Like Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono in his talks with his South Korean and Chinese counterparts recently, Abe is expected to press President Trump to bring up the topic of Japanese abductees in North Korea when he meets with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And while Sanders did not specify if trade includes talks on rejoining the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a free trade agreement between 11 Pacific Rim countries, there's speculation Abe will try to persuade Trump to follow through on his recent comments about rejoining if the conditions are right for the U.S. Abe is also expected to urge Trump to exempt Japan from Washington's plan to impose hefty tariffs on imports of steel and aluminum. The meeting provides Abe an important opportunity as he's in dire need of a policy win as he faces challenges abroad and protests at home. Having maintained a hardline stance on Pyongyang, Japan was caught on the back foot with the upcoming North Korean summits and the rapid diplomatic developments on the Korean peninsula. Japan has since been making efforts not to be left out of the negotiations. Abe is also reeling from a cronyism scandal that has caused his approval rating to plunge to historic lows. Abe will be staying at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort for the second time, holding summit talks on Tuesday and Wednesday, and playing at least one round of golf with the U.S. leader. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
And to tell us more about this, Professor Song Se-ryun from Kyung University joins us in the studio today. Hello, Professor.
Hello, good to be here.
All right, so just last week, Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono visited Korea to meet with President Moon Jae-in to talk about various issues, including North Korea. And like we saw in the report just now, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is now expected to meet with President Trump in Florida. So at this point, we're wondering, what is Japan hoping to achieve by, I guess, putting a great emphasis on the importance of alliance between the U.S., South Korea, and Japan?
Right. From Japan's point of view, so much focus is on what U.S. wants, what North Korea wants, South Korea wants. There is a legitimate concern about the quote-unquote Japan passing. I think he wants to address that, and by way of doing that, I think he will bring up the abductee issues so that that would be a kind of focus point of the discussion.
Okay.
That also represents Japan's line, which has traditionally been tough on the North Korean issues. So I think he will try to secure his presence of Japan in this important issue of Northeast Asia security and also talks between the North Korea and the rest.
So, I mean, ahead of the Inter-Korean Summit, which is slated for next Friday, South Korea and the U.S., the two of them have been stepping up efforts to boost cooperation on dealing with North Korea and other various issues surrounding it. In fact, South Korea's National Security Advisor, Chung Eui-yong, met with his American counterpart, John Bolton, for the first time while he was in the U.S. So how important is this kind of cooperation between South Korea and the U.S. at this point in time?
Yeah, very important in this drama. Plot thickens. It seems like there are not a shortage of a lot of developments. And this time, this drama will be played out in several acts. There will be a summit between the North and South, and then North Korea and the U.S., possibly maybe six-party talks later on in the development. Any kind of story, the key is to hold a storyline straight and not presented as confused. In this case, we have to have a coherent agenda because there are too many players. It's not just the North and South and the U.S., where China is there, Russia is butting in, and also Japan as well. So I think the key would be consistently focus on what is important and how those gaps between the different parties in terms of the definition of denuclearization and what kind of steps we take, those thorny and very detailed issues should be worked out in order to see any kind of productive results.
So can we, for now, say that the U.S. and South Korea kind of stand on the same line and one of the most important agendas, which is the denuclearization? Right. Even when we meet, we as in North Korea and South Korea, we're not meeting as individual sovereignty, but we represent kind of blocks. We kind of represent what the U.S. might want and Japan. Also, North Korea would be representing some of the China concerns and maybe Russia concerns as well. So there would be a lot of issues to be discussed, and denuclearization probably not only the definition of what denuclearization means, but how we achieve there. That traditionally, North Korea has kind of pushed for the multi-step approach, which we kind of criticize as a kind of salami approach, and we did not really give too much credence to that. But this time around, I don't know how they will kind of position themselves in terms of how many steps they want and what kind of preconditions they want. Of course, the U.S. has also its preconditions as well, meaning that U.S. wants the irreversible kind of denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula, which may or may not be acceptable to North Korea, but they will come out with traditional demand if they repeat it, complete withdrawal of U.S. troops in Korean Peninsula. That might be an issue. It might not be an issue if they think that that's the kind of a breaking point. Now, China and North Korea seem to be kind of taking their relationship to a whole new level now, because North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with Chinese top diplomat Sung Tao when he was in Pyongyang with a Chinese troop, and he met there and they talked about their bilateral cooperation there. And now we heard it earlier in the report, in the newscast, that President Xi Jinping is likely to visit Pyongyang sometime in June. So where is this China-North Korea relationship heading?
It was a dramatic development, but in hindsight, that made a lot of sense for both parties. For North Korea, if they want to be facing Donald Trump, who is very transactional and also very the deal savvy, they wanted some sort of insurance policy in the event that something does not pan out with the U.S. Even when there is a deal, they want China as an enforcer. You know, there have been many different cases where the U.S. gave some kind of assurance to a regime, but it didn't pan out. We can think of Libya as one, Iraq in the Reagan times, and also the Iran deal. Even Donald Trump threatened to back out. So the U.S. assurance alone is not something that the North Korea want to put too much credence on it. So they want some other superpowers to be in the picture, notably China. Also, China, from the China's point of view, again, there's a China passing possibility that was pretty prominent. They wanted to avoid that. And also, the China wants to be a prominent figure, not only in this talk, but also in a larger scheme of things, the hegemonic kind of struggle with the U.S. in the Northeast Asia. So they want to be a big figure in this room, and with the recovery of relationship between the North Korea, I think they secured that.
It definitely seems like things are working out that way for China. I mean, China did meet, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi also visited Japan to meet with his counterpart to talk about all this ongoings. But at this point, I'm kind of wondering, is China beginning to become more of a mediator in all of this? I mean, in the beginning, it was South Korea, us, that was in the driver's seat.
Right. That's a sticking point, I think. In order to keep this consistent storyline, the focus has to be on the South Korea, but as you mentioned, the China's role is becoming bigger and bigger. And China always been a key to this dialogue and the process. So what kind of role they want to play and do play would be another point that will make or break the whole process.
And there's also speculation growing over the possibility of North Korea perhaps requesting for a summit with Russia before the Trump-Kim summit. So what are the chances that we could be seeing that happening?
I think it's pretty good. Russia is not like the olden days, but Russia is still the member of the Security Council in the United Nations and also the member of the six-party talks. So they are de facto in the picture, and the relationship between the North Korea and the Russia could be in the same vein of the North Korea wanting to have more thuggish or
right.
the bigger friends in the picture
on
the side, just like China it plays that role and Russia is another.
Okay. Now, what is North Korea then hoping to achieve other than having these big guys on its side by reaching out to its allies?
Well, this time I think the dialogues, I would hope that is very important for North Korea. They've been playing this game for so many years. They've been kind of developing their nuclear capacity for this kind of event, sitting down with the U.S. and the West and get once and for all the concession or some kind of deal for the security and also economic gains. There is has already been a kind of a North Korea fatigue, so and they cried wolf so many times. So probably, if they're thinking clearly, this might be just about the last time, or dashing towards an end point where they could get a meaningful or productive deal out of this.
So let's get back to the issue of denuclearization. I mean, it seems like the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are kind of teaming up and stepping up cooperation for these upcoming summits, while North Korea has been reaching out to China and Russia. But they do differ on ways they view denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula.
Right. This is probably the biggest gap. The denuclearization, when it is uttered by the U.S. and in part Korea, is a complete irreversible denuclearization in the Korean Peninsula. Before we talk about some kind of meaningful package and the lifting of sanctions and all those, because we've been duped so much.
Many times.
Right. But as I mentioned, from the North Korea's point of view too, if they do that first, then those assurances that is given by the U.S. and the rest may not mean much, looking at Libya and other cases.
Okay.
So those 2 points and also how we get to the kind of agreed point and how many steps do we need, whether we need a six-party talks first and other series of steps, probably that would be the process-wise very important point. And those gaps, at this point, the gaps have to do with a lot of details. And truly, the devil is in the details if the talks go well.
Right. So we have 10 days to go until the Inter-Korean Summit on April 27th. With that in mind, what kind of role should South Korea play in this whole drama, involving North Korea? And also, what kind of strategies should Seoul have in place in order to really successfully denuclearize the Korean Peninsula?
Right. Because of that, I think that this time around, Korea has to play a big role. This narrative about how the denuclearization could happen and the deal could be made, because we have so many different players and because there's so many different interests clashing in this Korean Peninsula, Korea has to be the one who keeps the international alliance first and also keep the agenda very relevant to the peace in this peninsula. If not, things will happen the way it did before, meaning the failure of so many different talks before. The reason why the six-party talks have not worked so far is because of those complexities. And managing the complexities this time around would be the key, and that's the role for Korea.
All right, let's hope that things will be really different this time. Thank you so much for your insight today.
Thank you.
And that does it from me, but we'll be back here tomorrow at the same time for more in-depth analysis on various issues here in Korea and around the world, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and goodbye.
A call